How's it going? It seems to be, I've not long been up. It's still the morning. I made it. I've had a coffee. I've got my decaf here as well. It's probably like, I noticed in a previous video I'd done 3 videos in a day because we're heading out today to Lucia's, my partner's playing in Poland and Prague, so I've been stacking up some videos, and when this one goes out we might even be back, I don't know, but I did 3 videos in a day, and the end of that video I sounded like I'd been eating sand. I don't know, just so dehydrated and exhausted, but I feel good today, and when you feel good, or at least when I feel good, I feel like being vulnerable, which might sound like a really cheesy TED talk. I really fucking hope not. But the reason I mention that is I did this little sketch yesterday when I was incredibly tired. We got back from again, Lucy was playing, so we're just trying to recover in the day, trying to get some stuff done. And it got to sort of like early evening, and I figured, you know what, maybe I can just squeeze a few more hours and get a bit of a sketch going. Even if I don't get a video out of it, then it's just more kind of practice with this machine. Just practice, right? Like getting used to sound. I feel like it's just a regular thing. It's like exercise. If you don't do it, you just get lazy. So despite how long I've been doing music, I still feel practice is just so important. I've been doing stuff since I'm 45 now, so it's 35 years I've been making electronic music, which is pretty nuts when I think about it. That's just ridiculous. But maybe a conversation for another time. But being vulnerable. This was done yesterday, really tired, wasn't really feeling it, didn't really know. Just, when you're in that space where you're like, I've just no idea if this is any good, and it just sounded, I just wasn't able to hear it. That's probably the best way to describe it. I just wasn't able to hear what I was doing. Kind of doing all the stuff that I would normally do maybe, but I think you can just feel this in I have my eyes closed trying to imagine this right now. That sort of, I guess it's different for different people, but for me it's like you're inside your own head and you're trying to see, if that makes sense. You're trying to, there's all these little micro anxieties and uncertainties, and you just feel like if you've ever had that dream where you're in gluey substance in your it's probably a bad analogy. You're walking in gluey substance. That scene in I think the first Freddy Krueger film, it may have been the first one, I think it's got Johnny Depp in that one, where the main character's name, I forget her name, I want to say Kate or something, she's running up the stairs and her feet are kind of going into the glue. It's a classic dream. It feels a bit like that, but in the mind. So I thought it would be really cool to just do a video that is like me revisiting something that I made the previous day, which I really don't like doing, because sometimes it's I don't know, like you're in a different space, aren't you? At least it is for me. But when I press play, other than setting levels, that was like trying. You see me turning dials. Like, was this doing anything? And how much it transformed quite quickly into a different kind of mood, which is something this box kind of helps get to. I guess all stuff does to a degree, but this one, within one dial, you can kind of go into a very different headspace, which is great. For revisiting stuff, you can pick up off a previous point, like a previous sketch, and then be like, do you know what, I'm not really feeling that, and just kind of with a few parameter tweaks in quite a different place. I think that the way FM doesn't really or doesn't need to align with like your fixed kind of sense of key and scale and all that kind of stuff. It can go into really sort of atonal kind of areas, which I love, because I'm all about edgy, nastier sort of sounds than sort of the nicer ones. I mean, I like the nicer ones as well. I grew up on a Warp, so there's plenty of that. But even that, right? Even that had an edginess to it. It was never like it was never nice. It was always there was an edge to it, I think. Probably more so then than now, even. Well, definitely so. But yeah, so having that ability just to kind of go into some edginess, and very quickly I've noticed that was what happened. So it was quite interesting. It's also someone else mentioned in a comment about I forget your username. I will always forget usernames because, well, maybe I won't. I'm pretty bad at names, but they were mentioning how like the videos feel like there's someone with you in the studio, which is really great to hear, because that's definitely sort of how I imagined this sort of setup with sitting here talking. Is kind of like what would it be like if someone was just in here in my studio anyway, and it not be like this I don't know, version of like commercialized presentation of television, where it's completely artificial. I'm sure from wherever you are in the world, that when you go back to older TV, like 80s and 90s, depending on how old you are, maybe even 70s, maybe even 60s, Christ, could be that far back, but great times, right? Not that I was alive. There's a very different presentation of what is seen as like the norm, and I feel YouTube has its own version of that for sure. And I really like the channels on YouTube that are just people doing their thing, and there's not this kind of like commercialization. And if it's interesting, it's interesting. If it's not, then it's not. So yeah, that's really good to hear. And I kind of figured that sort of with that in mind, yeah, what's it like to be? I've never seen a video or even spoke about in the moment. More to the point, that what it's like to revisit something the next day. Normally, and I can't think of an example where this might happen. I guess like if you're in a band or you work with other people in your studio on a regular basis, this might happen. I don't really do that. So to revisit the track the next day, or to revisit the idea the next day and to hear it, or maybe maybe a late night studio session where you feel come out of it tired, but you feel like, yeah, we've got something. You go in the next day and you're still tired, and it's just not sounding right. How much of the sound is actually changed from when the lights got turned out when you left to when they got turned on in the morning, right? Nothing's changed except you. So, but I think it's really important to be aware of that. Like, so as soon as I become aware of that it's me that's changing here, then it really allows some objectivity to your own stuff, or a process of objectivity to your own stuff that otherwise, can potentially get in the way. It being like, you're not always in the same mood to even listen to the same music from other people. To expect that you're going to have that relationship when you want it with your own stuff is kind of crazy. So being open to almost, I kind of relate it to like paint and decorating. Like some days I'm up for stripping some wallpaper down, but generally it's a slog. But I, put the work in and appreciate the output, or appreciate the progress, or appreciate something at certain points when you stand back at the end of the night when there's no curtains on the windows and the light is on and you've got like bare floors and whatever and shit everywhere where you're decorating, and you're like, it's getting there, and you feel like a sense of like achievement or progress, or you start to imagine an end result, perhaps reflect on your learnings. I think that's feels a lot more of a manual work. 'Cause, I'm not an interior designer or anything, so it feels for me just like doing the work, and I try to apply that as much as possible to this sort of process of just putting the hours in and doing the work. And if I'm happy and I feel good on some days, then that's brilliant. But like generally, like to not expect that at all, and more importantly, to not let that expectation get in the way of what could otherwise be quite good output. I feel like we're just here to these dials and buttons are here just for us to turn and tweak. After that, let's let the fucking machine do the job, because that's what it's designed for. But yeah, I don't know, what does this sound like? It sounded okay. It sounded a bit like nice at the start for me, which is kind of probably why I turned it off last night, but I'm finding some edginess quite quickly. There's some, it's something. It's, I probably wouldn't release it. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. It's something, right? It's something. There was some kind of, let's have a little look through what we've got. There was some stuff I was doing that was kind of, trying to duplicate, the same sound on two tracks and have it like stereo. So you can kind of hear that. Just this sort of, reminded me of a sort of, when you hear certain repetitive sort of techno music, or even probably at some early warp stuff, you hear that kind of background texture that quite often was a result of like whatever equipment is opposed to specifically placed. I find with more modern gear, that I find this a little bit with this piece of equipment, but you kind of have to put it in, like as opposed to it being there. What I mean by that is, like, a lot of old equipment I have is like you turn it on and it's already making a noise because it's it's completely screwed. All the circuitries are buzzing and there's hissing, and old mixers with noise splitting, bleeding in between different channels. And all that on every single piece of outboard and every single piece of hardware, all summed up, is going to make a lot of bloody noise. It's great. I love it. You can use it, right? You can. It's arguably easier to deal with noise in kind of a creative sense than it is to have to apply noise in a creative sense. It always feels a bit like, adding tape wobble to a digital file to emulate the sound of tape. I mean, it's useful, but at the same time, it's sort of it sounds cool, but it feels different. It's sort of like I'm adding something here as opposed to just it being reacting to whatever you've got. So this was a little bit of that, like adding stuff, but also rhythmical. So you've the kind of wash of the reverb, and kind of wondering what how that kind of spreads on panning and that sort of stuff. So that was kind of what I was exploring, that, and kind of really to be a background. Also potentially maybe they could become leads, like, so when track 1 kind of maybe drops away, you could have track 2 and 3 kind of take the forefront. So I wondered with, say, like, to just go into one track and then panning it over. Is there a way just to like hop that into the middle? No, obviously that would be too easy. Yeah. So maybe like this changes to something, I don't know. Yeah, potentially. So I should probably put it back before I forget the settings. What was it? I don't know, 34 or something, 9, and this one was like on 127. So there's probably an easy way to do this. 127. There we go, we got it. Yeah, so kind of thinking of that sort of thing in mind, and the buttons so hard. And this one being the more, you can kind of hear the similarity. So I kind of copied over, I basically created a bit of a pattern in track 1, copied it to track 2 and 3, and then just kind of modified it a little bit. Also found out you can move all the steps along, which I was thinking you couldn't do. So basically you probably know like how to do this, but I'm not saying it for a tutorial basis. I'm saying, as someone mentioned this to me, no, they're good tutorials. I'm like, I don't think I'm doing tutorials here, but maybe there is a bit, but I'm just sort of wanted to share what I've learned because it was quite cool. It's probably easier to hear it on the other one, but you can just basically hold down track and then move the steps along, so you can kind of move this is a bit difficult to see because it's like they're all full up, but moving them backwards and forwards, which is quite cool. So the high one, 3 and 4, another 7 and 8. So you can just move it around track and moving around. So I guess that trig little note there that's what that's for. So yeah, some hidden kind of shortcuts and things. So I basically did that, copied them over and then moved them around a bit. Initially trying to think of like maybe I can kind of create more interesting delay textures that I quite like the delay in this, but just to have like variation and then be able to maybe process the delayed, so like a duplication of the track but in a different one, and then tweaking it, and then it sounds like a delay, but then when you modify it, modify the sound, it's then obviously not a delay and it becomes its own thing. So you get this sort of sense of sounds that are like connected and then they separate. So then you get this sort of sense of like, oh, this one's in the 4, this one's in the 4. It's quite good. Kind of works, doesn't it? That kind of idea. Yeah, that was kind of the thinking, and then obviously that kind of largely went out the window as I was playing around, as it tends to. Also, someone mentioned a really cool shortcut holder. You might see me holding down LFO, and then whatever dial you turn, it automatically assigns to that dial, so you can change the depth, which is awesome. because see, that sounds good. Yeah, I do like those more kind of like sawtooth square wave kind of grit than I do the glassy FM stuff. And it's I find it's an effort to try to keep myself from stepping into the FM glassy tones by just turning a dial. It's like, oh, I'm in the glassy tones again. It'd be nice to kind of keep it in the grit. But there are some reasonably large sweet spots around the grit which I quite like, and this being one of them. Yeah, so you can just see, right? Just like, oh, here's something, and you just kind of play around. It can be really percussive with short decays, and punctuated with the reverb. Also, actually, this square wave LFO shape is pretty useful, especially when you set the fade and the phase off. The S cycle, no, what would it be? Something phase is something phase. But yeah, basically you're kind of like telling it, from at least how I understand it, it's there's a reset points every time the triggers it resets it, but then it where on that waveform is it resetting, right? Is it part way through or at the start? And then a fade is just like just fading in, basically fading in that effect. So the reason that's interesting is when it's set against something that has quite a dramatic sound, and then you have the phase that it's basically just catching. It's just catching the end of like the square as it drops off. So you get this sort of percussive doubling kind of thing, and when that's on its extremities, you get with the depth, you get this sort of like broken, extra clicky kind of. Because it's so close to because it's such a short thing, the ear just kind of blurs those sounds in together, so you're kind of hearing this sort of more interesting waveform as opposed to like gradual transitions or whatever. So I quite like that. I guess it's more, if you put the decay up, we can probably this one. Yeah, you get the idea. I was kind of playing around with that a bit. So obviously, like sometimes you're playing around with a setting, and then the sound changes, and then the settings like that one doesn't have as much impact as I thought it would. But it's in there. It's in there. Interesting to kind of interesting to kind of have it there, and there's this sort of feeling of wanting to clear out, like, oh, that's not doing anything anymore. When you get really into the complexities of changing sounds, and then it feels like that messy cupboard again. Like there's just loads of settings, and I just want to reset. And I see a lot of forum posts and people talking about organising their gear and organising the internal folder structure and all that kind of thing, which is I think is I got a good friend from back home who's very particular about organising things, and takes a lot of enjoyment presumably from organising. Doesn't consider themselves making music, although they do. But yeah, it's interesting where you kind of put your attention, or what might be like the attention to kind of take enjoyment from it. But I don't mind a messy. That's a lie. I do mind, but I'm not going to let the mess we're talking like, does this parameter still have an application? I clearly have an issue with it, but I'm not going to let that get in the way of like making sound. So I think this machine again like allows that quickly moving around. It's not going to get in the way. It's pretty simple stuff. So it's cool. Yeah, I'm kind of liking it. I'm liking the fact I can just pick this up, plug it in, whack down some patterns, explore the kind of edges. Maybe like, each one has its own, sometimes has its own steps applied for the sweep. I'm looking, and none of them have. So obviously I got rid of that. Sometimes you can do that. Sometimes you can have different machines. I also like that the parameters transfer quite well, so you can jump through different machines to see how those sequences might apply to a different sound engine, which reminds me massively of preset synthesizers. You've kind of got a sequence and you've kind of listened to this loop over and over maybe, and then you're like, do you know what, I need a break from this sound, and you can just whack through some presets to give you different, like, just refresh your ears and refresh your kind of ideas of where something might have to go or need to go. We can get easily locked into like, this is the track. I try to not worry about what the track is as long as possible. Really, even when we put stuff out, I'm still listening to it going, oh, this, still being able to say, oh, actually this has turned out okay, and it's already been released. I think that's such a liberating, refreshing experience that I don't need to be like standing by my music as like I'm 100%, or I have to pretend I'm 100% behind it. Like, it's just, I don't see the point. I mean, whether I'm happy or not is kind of irrelevant, right? Like, in terms of the output, if the output sounds good and people like it or people don't, like, there's nothing I can do. It's just how I feel is how I feel. So dealing with that and then having some level of separation, I think really helps me. I used to never be able to put stuff out, never send stuff off. Am I happy with it? I just try not to give a shit anymore because I care too much, basically. But yeah, I don't know. Sounds cool. I'm kind of happy. It feels okay. I can guarantee on another day, revisiting something from the previous day is going to be like, let's just delete this. But that's fine too. So I'm probably going to move on to another sequence and maybe see if I can get some more videos done today before I head out. And then hopefully these will be posted as I'm traveling. I'm looking forward to getting back already, just to relax and doing some bits. Got some cool news as well. Along my travels, there's a really cool label called Hard Return. Check them out on Bandcamp. They do really repetitive kind of electronic music. Is probably the umbrella term I'd give it, but it does diverge. But Jack Chuter, who runs the ATTN magazine online, you might have come across that. Super nice guy, based out of the UK. They done their first, I'm pretty sure, 100% sure actually, that it was Hard Return, their label night for the first one in a Cafe Otto in London here. It wasn't yesterday, the day before. Really cool night, just having people in the room together, lots of people that I hadn't met face to face could meet face to face and hear some cool music play live. Really, really fun. So, but the reason I mention it, apart from go and check out that label because it's great, is someone asked me to play live, so that's great. So I'm going to be playing live in London, in Deptford, South London in November somewhen, so date to be confirmed, but I haven't played live successfully for a while. The last live event I did, I really fucking hated it. I'd done it for a friend's birthday, didn't really enjoy myself at all, super anxious, really tired. Tried to do something, I tried to make it up as I went along. It probably sounded okay. It sounded fine, but I fucking hated it. Didn't have fun at all. It was a good night apart from that though. And I think the previous time would have been, Christ, maybe 2018 was the last one, which is on this YouTube channel, in fact, at New River Studios in London for Edited Arts or something, I think it was called. Super stressful night. The PA wasn't working, but it really helped. I was like, you know what, fuck it, I'm just going to do my thing. And that tendency to be aggressive about, like, if I'm pushed up against the wall, I can function because I'm used to that. But if it's all nice, then it's a nightmare. So so we'll do. It was going to be interesting. I'm going to be making a lot of stuff, I think, on the rhythm again soon, alongside this and other boxes that we'll be exploring, like how to sort this out for a live set. Like I've not successfully managed to get a live set out of that rhythm. I know I'm going to have some really weird ways of working with it in terms of a live setup. I'm already skewing my eyes thinking about how that's going to work. So it'd be great to have you guys along with me on that and helping me with that, potentially saying what sounds good, what sounds shit. And then if you're in London, then it'd be great to come along and check it out. It's free potentially, so, and they have food, so you can, there's a suggested amount to pay. Really nice people who run it. Really inspired by that kind of community idea and putting on stuff for people that might have less access to it. Very keen to do that myself, so maybe as some events from myself in the future. We will see, but yeah, I thought I'd share that with you. It's quite exciting, not so much for it to come along, but feel free, but just because it's going to impact the stuff I create in an exciting way, so that should be quite cool. I'm going to leave it there. This video's half an hour. I need to sip some decaf. Nice one. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.